Now, are you watching the cryptocurrency market thinking nothing's happening? Bitcoin's calm, altcoins are somewhat flat, and yeah, you can argue hype is gone. But what if I told you this was like the great reset of people, if that makes sense? I'll explain it in this video, don't worry. Now, for me, it being dead isn't a bad thing, especially if you understand the term investing and wealth. And I think personally you should feel good about it only because it gets rid of a lot of the noise. And as I say, it's a bit of a shift and a big one as well, and I think people have cottoned on to the idea of it. Now, the reality check is somewhat simple. On the screen, that is obviously 26.52 million. I know. And that's just tracked cryptocurrencies. Now, I know people in the comments can go, oh, but yeah, there's going to be a lot of dead ones in there. I know. But we do need to have an honest conversation about it all. So if you like this sort of thing, leave a like on the video. And if you want more of this stuff, subscribe and comment what you think, because I think it's good to have a discussion and an open discussion about what sort of state this market has became realistically. And I want it to be an honest conversation as a video. Now, this is a sort of conversation and content that I do on my Patreon quite a lot, where I talk openly about the market. And if you're interested in more of this stuff, jump in, and I'll go through that in more detail in a second. But I don't want to sell to you. I want to sell to you the idea that has been happening for the last year, maybe longer. And I have been talking about this before. So let's talk about it. Let's go through why I feel the market is somewhat shifting very, very rapidly. And you can see just below my head, I don't want to kind of cover all of it, but we have been tracking a lot of cryptocurrencies over the course of 2025 very, very rapidly, obviously with the Solana meme coin bollocks and all that kind of shit. A majority of the market share is fundamentally Solana. So if you take away Solana and Base as well, BSC, all the shite chains, you've got a bit of a situation where there isn't that many altcoins. But when you add to the fact that there's a lot of big ones in there and obviously liquidity, and the reality check is there's not enough liquidity for the amount of tokens we have. And that's creating, again, a bit of an imbalance. So I found a really good article on 21 Shares here, and we could talk about it as well in terms of thousands of altcoins, but no alt season, right? And this was in April, by the way. And we haven't had anything realistically since, especially if you talk about in the grand scheme of things, apart from a little bit of a mini Ethereum influx, right? So when we talk about what sparked the previous ones, the birth of the altcoins, yeah, that was a good starting point. And then we could talk about multiple use cases and excessive liquidity. We can talk about COVID and all that kind of situation around that and why that pumped. But now we're looking at Ethereum is no longer the sole leader, which again, it becomes a bit of a situation when you got, Sui, Solana, etc., even XRP. And more money's trapped in there, not rotating into the situation where we normally had this Bitcoin into Ethereum, mid caps, micro caps, a rotation. We haven't had one of those for a very long time. And I know if you follow my channel, I talk about the checklist of what to look for all the time. And we always get to like stage 2 and then it evaporates. So it's kind of annoying, especially from a content creation point of view. But here we go. Why did altcoins not perform? Essentially, oversupply of tokens. I cannot compute in my brain that people don't understand this. I know there will be people in the comments going, but we'll get a rotation. It will happen eventually. We are talking many hundreds of days over what we normally get. When we talk about where Bitcoin has been to where it is and where Ethereum has been and where it's gotten to, or Solana, or XRP, whatever, and we've never had a real influx elsewhere, you start scratching your head. And that's where the reality check needs to come in for a lot of people. 85% of cryptocurrencies, I think maybe more now, are worth less than a cent and worth a certain value. They pretty much are dying. That's the grand scheme of things. But when we talk about the accumulation of this, you can see, as I just alluded to it, Solana is really eating the chunk of it, which is a situation that we have a problem for. And obviously the underperforming projects, a lot of projects are closing up when it happens, sadly. Now, we can talk about Camel Finance in terms of one of his posts recently. Now, Camel's a really good content creator. He's getting a lot of shit at the minute because he's kind of been right and people don't like that, and that happens. But Wall Street will tame Bitcoin. And it has happened. It really has happened. We could talk about this in so many ways. But there's another situation we could talk about here, where this post was on my Discord before. Total 2 shows that there's not more money in the market than there was in the last cycle, but there's a million more coins. And when we look at the grand scheme of things, right, the emissions of every altcoin is hugely important here. And we've got to talk about that. Because when we talk about the total 2, it is an accumulation of worth of the market capitalization of the top assets, right? That is becoming a bit of a situation because we're getting more and more assets and they're having more and more emissions, which is basically, in quote unquote, they're getting sold into via the team or whatever situation. And the liquidity isn't really kind of keeping it up, which is, again, you can talk about oversupply, the noise of millions of tokens, the hype, the signal to noise ratio is unbelievable at the minute, but certainly on every project that you look at. And that crowd psychology of people are tied to the fake promises and are getting sold into, leading to the quickest rich possible is going into USD and losing your money, essentially, right? That's where the situation has massively changed. But go into this article here, and again, we can talk about it. Top 5 cryptocurrencies now make 82% of the total market value. I know that stat is wrong now because this is from an older article from a couple of months ago. It has gotten worse. By the way, if you're in the UK and you've got issues with getting into exchanges these days, which is quite hard, check out Blowfin. There's a link below. 20% back on fees. It's a really good exchange, and I will be looking to do some positional trades over the next coming weeks. I'll be talking about them in Patreon on the videos in terms of what I'm looking for, because I think time is now of interest in terms of where we go with volatility. So yeah, jump in. Now, on the screen, I found a fantastic article. And this is what we're going to talk about in a little bit more depth in terms of like 5 things to watch for. Now, if you're new to the channel, you may not know this, but I have talked about this in most of my videos for the last 6 months, certainly certain situations, or over the last few years. The first situation we need to talk about is, as you can see, spoiler alert, the sign of dominance of Bitcoin dropping. We haven't really had that, right? And we could talk about that in a situation, but we're going to go on to in a minute why a lot of this is positive for the market in terms of that rotation of people. And again, talking about it, open conversation. So yeah, we haven't really had this. We haven't really had much things overall overperforming Bitcoin. And I know people get battered by, oh, but why are you talking about Bitcoin pairs? Realistically, it's massively important. And I think people have finally gotten onto it. Now, the second one, rising market liquidity and exchange inflows. I talk a lot about this chart, and I also talk a lot about USDT dominance. Huge. If that goes up, bad. If that goes down, good. We haven't really got below 5% for a long, long time. And it has been doing certain things, but it is at the minute rotating upwards, which is a problem. Basically, people are going from altcoins, which is why the market's red, into, say, stable currencies to kind of sit on their hands a little bit. The government shutdown in the US probably isn't helping things neither, but that's one situation where we have to look at, and it is a very, very obvious one, a bit of a problem. Going into the next part of this, and we could talk about just scrolling down here, I'm just glancing through it, on-chain activity and developer growth. We've had cryptocurrencies die. We've had coins just flatline in their GitHub. That's a big problem, especially when you look at the fundamentals of why an altcoin will move, or more importantly, why developer networks are hugely important for the upcycle of a coin. Because realistically, the wealth of an altcoin isn't through the product, it's through what are they going to do next. Sorry, that is kind of the crux of it in the technical jargon, where basically you are sold those empty promises. That's what sparks interest. It's not about the finished product. Let's be honest, we know this. The finished product in an altcoin doesn't matter. It's about the hype. It's about them little tweets. There's announcements for the announcement. That's what get people driving, buying it. Yeah, it's a bit of an issue, isn't it? Now, obviously, you can see the sign 4 here, the sign of retail and social sentiment. Again, we talk about the 10x's, the predictions, the YouTube videos, the white paper, the roadmap, the as I said before, the announcement for the announcement, get people engaged and talking about it. We haven't really had much going on in many altcoins that has done well. We've had, random example, Chainlink has partnered with the government, like the US department, right? Did nothing. Really, it actually got worse. So the situation like that where it's big issue. Fear and greed index, obviously the tracking sentiment, all this kind of like, you get the idea, right? We'll talk about YouTube in a minute, but you get the point. And obviously the final one, the macro side of it. Economics, the regulatory tailwinds, Trump, for example, FOMC, the dollar, all that kind of stuff. And it's if you've been watching my channel, you should know this anyways, right? Realistically. but some people don't. And it just blows my brains how people do not look at this at all in terms of why things have stood still and why Bitcoin is now remaining calm. But what I'm going to say now is why everything that I've just said could be a positive if you understand the game of investing. And I talked about that before at the start of this video. The calm and the stagnation is essentially a foundation for wealth. It really is, because what's happening, Bitcoin is calm, kind of. I know it's down a little bit, but it is. I don't think we're going to see those 70, 80% pullbacks in Bitcoin ever again. And I know that's kind of a big thing. We will in altcoins, because you're going to get those leverage high bubbles, and those are going to dominate the situation, right? And obviously lower supply of obviously Bitcoin and the scarcity model is going to be a huge factor, whereas altcoins had the opposite of that completely. And that stability in Bitcoin, obviously with the ETF inflows, and obviously I mentioned Camel Finance before, is a huge factor in terms of institutional wealth, of growing your portfolio, essentially growth cargo every single year on average, which is usually what Bitcoin would do. And I think people have missed the entire boat with that. But the mindset shift is hugely important from the likes of YouTube, for example. And my YouTube analytics just blows my brains. Certain type of content just does awful. Certain content does well. And even here, like, you can look at Crypto Banter, 1.18 million subscribers and 13,000 people watch that YouTube stream. And yeah, it's very bearish, but you would have thought that there would be a few more people watching that realistically. And that's the thing. Even when we're looking at certain, other channels, there's a lot of channels here that have got a lot of subscribers, but not many views. And I can hold my hand up exactly the same situation. The mindset has totally changed. And I think people have massively left the cryptocurrency space and may never come back. Historically, that angle's pretty good because I like it, but we are still getting the odd bits and pieces that I don't like. Look at CZ yesterday, for example, buying his DEX coin or whatever, openly talking about it. It shilled, it went up, and then all of a sudden he's talking about, I wish I bought more now. Those sort of things become bad actors, and those bad actors become problems, and I want those problems to go away. The opportunity is for me, and I think it now, the crowd is distracted. The hype is up. People are buggering off. And I did a video on my last video, about don't quit and how people will make money over time by just staying in the market because they understand the game. Yeah, fewer eyeballs, fewer herd situations of coins growing, less competition. But that is usually where people buy and buy well and do well. But another thing that is crazy, I know I'll go on the tangent a little bit, but there's over 400,000 cryptocurrency YouTube channels. There's far too many content creators. And again, we could talk about the spread of that as well. The views are far too spread across many, many people. And I think everyone's suffering from one situation alone, the hype. I mean, just to give you a bit of a point, look at the length that people go through just to get views. Alt season confirmed in 24 hours. Amazing. Now, before I go on, Patreon, for example, talks a lot about the things I'm going to talk about here. You can jump in here for free, by the way, if you want to. You get extra content. Every Monday, there's content. There's going to be a lot more stuff coming, such as live streams and audio podcast stuff coming. There's a lot of good stuff. Not to mention the fact that you get a Discord where you can ask questions and you will get answered and people will help you. It's a good place to be. But let's talk about mindset. Because even though Bitcoin looks horrible, you will still be up if you bought the lows, obviously. But we're going to talk about mindset shift. And I think there's 3 obvious rules here, right? The first one is acceptance. Accept the silence, don't fight it. And for obvious reason, it is a situation where if Bitcoin's stable, you're not going to get the mental volatility, right? Now, the second one, obviously, is the focus. The focus on duration, time. Wealth happens over time, not just hype, not just the quick riches. You got to think of the obvious situation there. And I think people overlook that every single time. And look at the other side of the fence. If everyone's expecting a pump, shouldn't you not think a bit differently? Basically, don't be a sheep. Or, let's be honest, think for yourself. But there's also other rules we need to talk about. And I know these are going to sound very obvious, but focus on quality, not quantity. Too many people still now have like 20, 30, 40, 50 altcoins expecting to get rich. And I know people are like, oh, but it will happen eventually. But what if it doesn't? And I said this before in a previous video. Is it worth 2 years of pain for like 2 weeks of euphoria? Probably not, no. And again, I talk about this a lot. If you're looking at rules for action, look at the dominance and the rotation signals, not what everyone else is doing. And I'm hoping this one makes sense, but allocation size. Have more Bitcoin versus altcoins, for God's sake. But again, we could talk about this next bit, and the obvious bit is stay liquid. Have something for opportunities. Too many people are just all in on a random altcoin. They're trapped in it. They've got no liquidity. If you think that somebody's going to go low, are you able to capitalize on it? You need some money to do that. And also, a little bit of an asterisk, don't be balls deep in leverage. And the final one there is understand the flow. Utility flow, obviously. Unlocks, emissions, avoid projects with high team situation around percentages, high inflation, obviously, no real roadmap, because realistically they're just going to come down, especially when the hype goes. But I'm hoping all that just makes sense. It's kind of obvious, really, but the one obvious is I think most people fail on is the allocation size. I see it on my Patreon. I see it on my Discord. We do polls on it all the time. Guess what? People have like less than 20% Bitcoin these days. It's crazy. Now, I don't think the market is broken. I just think it's maturing. I think people have cottoned on to certain things. I think people have cottoned on to the fact that Bitcoin is probably better than everything else. There's not enough liquidity and there's too many altcoins. And that will remain like that probably for a while. And if we do get a pump, it probably will be the same situation what we've already had. The random doesn't pump. The good stuff does. Quality, as I have alluded to it, is probably the best way to go instead of quantity. Pick the obvious, pick the best, and then have that conviction to buy it low, to understand the game and the inflows and the outflows, whatever it may be. And what are the institutions interested in? At the end of the day, I think this market has changed, whether it's good or bad. I think it's for the good because it may well change things. But if you're looking to get rich quick, I think those days are numbered. And if you're not yet done so, watch this video about do not quit. It's quite a gimmicky sort of title, but ultimately it really does make sense because if you do quit, you lose.